Rainbow Reflections, Book 1, A Kind of Magic, Chapter 26, Masterstroke. Zin patted the magical objects in his robe pockets, hoping they wouldn't be too noticeable. He took a deep breath and released it. I have to do this. C3 needs to hand over those notes. I don't know where he's keeping them, but he better give them to me. Zin had tried getting into C3's room on numerous occasions during the spring term, but the lock couldn't be picked even after Zin searched lock-picking tutorials on the internet. Only specific keys could open the doors, and there was no way Zin would be able to snatch C3's key from him. He therefore gave up on that idea, as the only other option would be to kick down the door, which was not a good idea in the slightest. He had tried following C3 around, but that plan quickly failed too. C3 only seemed to go to classrooms and the eating hall. A few times he saw C3 go to different clubs during the week, but Zin would always be in the middle of something and unable to trail him. Zin was starting to lose patience. He had already played around with his few enchanted objects, trying to test out the magic in them. As a result, the magic within them weakened. Zin had stopped using them, wanting to conserve the remaining magic. But Zin wanted to be able to enchant any object, even if it was Ren enchanting them for him. He could spend all summer playing with the objects, that way he wasn't a stranger to magic the next school year. In fact, Zin was hoping he'd be able to learn magic over the summer and be placed in the second-year classes by the next school year, where he'd be with Ren again. Yet if Zin was unable to work with any enchanted objects, how would he ever be able to catch up? He had to get those notes. He left his room, glad that his robe was patterned in leaves, which would hopefully hide the lumps formed by the objects. Reaching the family room, he was happy to see Ren wasn't there yet. Zin then left the tower and headed towards the eastern building, the only student who seemed to be awake that morning. He breathed in the morning air, floral scents mingling with the dampness. But soon after Zin thought he was the only one up and about, the door to the art studio creaked open. Zin jumped in fright, then smiled as he saw the very person he was looking for. C3! Zin said joyfully. What are you doing up at this time? C3 frowned, pausing in the doorway with his hand still on the wooden knob. He had stopped showing up to the art club, clearly trying to avoid Zin wherever he could. What, not going to say hi? Zin scoffed, keeping his tone light.
What are you doing up?
C3 queried instead. Zin shrugged. I'm always up early.
You're never in the courtyard at this hour, though,
C3 said suspiciously. Zin raised an eyebrow. Do you keep track of my movements?
Only because you've been keeping track of mine,
C3 replied. He knows, Zin thought. Well, you did steal my friend's notes, he pointed out. I want them back.
I don't have them,
C3 said shortly. Of course you do. You stole them and you know it.
I have no idea what you're talking about,
the boy said slyly. Zin's lip curled back. It was just like C3 to deny he'd ever done anything wrong. Zin was quivering in anger, but tried to keep his temper down.
Well, I'll see you later,
C3 said with a shrug. I challenge you to a duel, Zin growled, stepping forward quickly before C3 could make his escape. C3 paused in his tracks and looked back at Zin, an odd look on his face.
A duel? A magical duel? A magical duel that's against the rules?
Zin nodded once, pursing his lips.
You must be desperate for those notes,
C3 sneered. If I win, you hand them over, Zin said.
And when I win, you stop pestering me about the notes and following me,
C3 said. Don't you mean if? C3 shrugged carelessly.
You don't have your magic. And even if you didn't take your potion today, so you could potentially reach your magic, you've not been practicing. So I doubt you have much chance of winning.
That's what you think, Zin thought angrily. Whatever, nobody hears about this duel. Are we in agreement? C3 nodded.
Quite so. Let's go to the Kung Fu studio.
He closed the door to the art studio and walked towards the Kung Fu studio. Zin followed right after him, his feet scuffing against the stone. What were you doing in the art studio? Zin asked, not bothering to keep the accusing tone from his voice.
None of your business. And no, I will not tell you if you somehow win.
Zin scowled. They entered the Kung Fu studio, the lights turning on as the door opened. Closing the door behind them, they pulled the blinds over the front window overlooking the courtyard. The two then took off their shoes and stepped on the mat. Outside shoes weren't allowed on the mats, taking their places in the center about 6 feet apart. C3 pulled out his wand almost lazily.
You ready? I'll give the order to go.
Zin nodded, not bothering to take out any of his objects just yet. He didn't bring his useless wand with him, and therefore didn't pull out anything.
No wand?
C3 scoffed.
You can at least go into a duel somewhat prepared, even if your magic is pathetic, especially since you wanted this duel.
Zin shrugged quietly, trying to appear more confident than he felt.
Go!
C3 ordered. Before C3 could demand his wand to throw any magic, Zin pulled out the first object in his pocket. He didn't need to look at it to know that it was a small stone, the smoothest rock he had ever touched. He squeezed the stone twice before throwing it at C3. The rock released a cloud of smoke, which covered C3 and made him cough. Zin smiled and pulled out his next object, which was a cube with rounded edges. He tapped each side of the box in a specific order, which awoke the enchantments. This was why he needed the smoke to delay C3's attack. Once the cube was glowing in Zin's hand, he threw that towards C3 too. The cube opened up as it was thrown, growing in size at the same time. A large cage soon stood before Zin, the top of it visible over the smoke.
Clear the smoke,
C3 ordered. A waft of air flung the smoke aside, and Zin saw with delight that C3 was successfully captured in the box, and he looked furious.
You can't do that! You're cheating!
C3 growled. Zin chuckled. No, I'm not, actually. I looked up all the rules on the internet, and a magic duel surprisingly has few rules. There was nothing against enchanted objects in there. The only requirement pertaining to magic was that both people use magic, and they don't kill or seriously wound each other. Obviously. C3 frowned. He seemed to be thinking this over in his head for a moment. Then he sneered at Zin.
This doesn't mean you've won. You don't win until I'm knocked off my feet. I can still fight from in here. Knock Zinimus over!
He ordered his wand. Air hit Zin at once, trying to force him down. He lowered his body to be more stable, and luckily did not fall over.
Are you out of magic tricks?
C3 jeered, sounding delighted as he stopped the slamming winds. Funny that you mention magic tricks, Zin said, and he pulled another box from his pocket.
What is that?
C3 asked, squinting to see it better. Zin got to his feet and approached the cage, but made sure not to get too close. He then opened the box and pulled out a card.
Magic cards?
C3 asked, his eyes widening. A whole box of magic, Zin said cheerfully. I've been working with them throughout the semester. They each do different things. It's quite fun.
You wouldn't,
C3 hissed. Oh, yeah? Zin glanced at the card in his hand, which had a circle drawn on it. Zin used the card to make a circle in the air, then slashed the card through it. Drawing the circle triggered the enchantment, and slashing the card a certain way sent the card's magic in that particular direction. This card was labeled Plant, and, sure enough, a plant appeared directly in front of C3. The deck of magic cards was probably the most expensive item Zin owned, as the enchantments were stronger than other enchanted objects. Hyaktu had come up with the idea himself, and this was the only deck he had ever made. The plant was tall and slimy, with a large mouth that snapped towards C3 in the cage. C3 yelped in fright and staggered to the back of his prison, lifting his wand in front of him. Then he smiled at Zin from around the plant as he pocketed his wand. He slid the gold ring from his elbow, allowing his left sleeve to fall down.
Did you think I wasn't able to enchant any objects myself?
He sneered. He shook the ring several times, then threw it out the cage. It sliced the plant in half, causing the biting plant to die and vanish. The ring returned to C3's hand like a boomerang. Zin frowned. Why didn't he consider that C3 would have enchanted objects of his own? No matter, I still have more than him, I hope. He pulled out another card from his deck, drawing a spiral in the air this time. As he slashed the card, sending a wave of water towards C3, C3 threw his ring again. The water pummeled C3 at the same time that C3's ring smacked Zin. C3 was knocked to the ground, the water vanishing as it hit the floor. Zin fell down, the ring slamming into him with the force of a thrown couch. They both sat on the ground, staring at one another as C3's ring returned to him. It's a draw, Zin muttered at last. They both sprang to their feet at the same time, as if whoever was on their feet first would win.
I guess neither of us has to do anything,
C3 said snootily, pointing his nose in the air. Zin shook his head. Or both of us win, and we both get what we want. If you give me the notes, then I'll no longer bother you. It's a win-win. C3 snorted.
Like that'll happen.
Come on, C3, just give me the notes.
It seems like you already know how to enchant objects, or that your sister does anyway.
These are objects I got from our travels around the world, Zin said, motioning to the box and stone. I want to be able to enchant my own. I need those notes.
Just wait until next year. Your sister will learn how,
C3 said. Please, C3.
I don't have them,
C3 shouted. You're lying.
No, I'm not,
he muttered.
I destroyed them.
You destroyed them? Zin mumbled. Why? C3 sighed and held up the ring.
I didn't actually enchant this. I was not able to enchant a single thing. Those notes are either fake or there's something that was missing. So I ripped them to bits when I got frustrated.
Zin frowned. Then who enchanted the ring for you?
I got it when we were traveling around Galia,
C3 said, shoving it back on his elbow to hold up his sleeve. But I thought your family was, well...
Poor?
C3 spat.
Yeah, we are. I received this as a gift from a stranger.
Zin wasn't sure he believed that. Who would give an enchanted and expensive object to a complete stranger? The box holding C3 fell away, returning to the form of a small cube. Zin glared at the cube and stone on the ground. They were useless now, their magic entirely gone. C3 kicked the cube away from him, as if frightened that it'd cage him again. He then approached Zin, a smug smile on his face.
It appears I've won, then,
he said. What makes you say that?
I don't have any notes to give you, so you'll leave me alone,
C3 pointed out. Zin snorted, his hands clenching. I won't leave you alone. I know how to be annoying, and I'll annoy you every day.
But there's no reason to do so,
C3 argued.
I don't have anything to give to you. I cannot help you.
What if we looked up ways to enchant objects together? Zin asked. I couldn't find anything in the library, but I was probably looking in all the wrong sections or skipped some tiny paragraph when I was flipping through books. And the internet has nothing on this stuff unless you know someone who can get you in a group for him. We can be a team. C3 shook his head.
I think not,
he said as he walked towards the door, pausing to place his shoes back on. Zin sighed, then saw a small object lying on the floor. Hey, you dropped something, he said, pointing at the place where C3 had just been. C3 glanced back, then his mismatched eyes widened. He hurried over, but not before Zin had picked up the object. Hey, that's a mirror shard, Zin yelped.
Give it back, it's mine,
C3 growled, snatching it from his grasp quickly. No, it's not.
Yeah, it is,
C3 hissed, pocketing the shard. Sarala found one of those ages ago, Zin said, his lip curling back as he glared at C3. C3 narrowed his eyes, but made no response. Those things are dangerous. Dad said so.
Are you certain he said that?
Yeah? C3 snorted.
You sound doubtful.
Let's go bring it to him right away, Zin urged, stepping closer to C3. C3 moved back a pace.
Mr. Saihan is not here right now. He left the school.
What? No, he didn't.
Yes, he did,
C3 grunted.
I saw a giant ship fly out of the northeastern tower this morning when I was going to the art studio. Since the only way into that tower is from the bridge connected to your tower, I'm going to assume your father was the one flying it. Unless Ren or Sarala know how to, which I seriously doubt.
Zin's heartbeat quickened. Why did Dad leave the school? Did something else happen with Ren's visions? What's with all these mirror shards?
Farewell.
C3 abruptly left the Kung Fu studio, Zin gaping after him. Zin shook his head roughly, grabbed his Cuban rock from the ground, and hurried towards the door. He stopped only to stuff the objects in his pockets and pull on his shoes, then flung the door open and hurried after C3. C3 was already on the elevator going up to the 3rd floor of the eastern building. C3, wait up! Zin called. A few students glanced as he ran past them. The sun was higher in the sky, and the bell had already rung for breakfast. Zin must have missed it when he and C3 had been dueling. Zin, there you are. Zin skidded to a stop as he reached the eastern building. He glanced over his shoulder to see Ren headed towards him, Sarala on her heel. A door closed above him, telling Zin that C3 had already darted inside the building. Elevator! Zin called, before he turned to his sister. Where are you going? Ren asked. We've been looking for you everywhere. I thought you were sick, since you didn't yell out your greeting. Your lack of a greeting woke me up, Sarala added grumpily. I was just practicing martial arts, Zin said hurriedly. See you at breakfast! He hurried onto the platform, shouting, 3rd floor! But Ren and Sarala soon hopped on board just before the railings came up and the elevator lifted into the air. Where are you going? Ren repeated. You're right, Ren. He is hiding something, Sarala muttered in an accusing voice. Zin ignored them and flung the door open to the 3rd floor of the student quarters. He hurried to the end of the hall and came to a stop outside C3's door. Knocking on the door loudly, several students opened their doors and told him to stop the noise. Luckily, the students quickly went to breakfast, leaving Zin, Ren, and Sarala alone in the hallway. C3, open up! Zin shouted, rattling the door so much he was surprised it didn't already fall off its hinges. Or I'll kick down your door! Zin! Ren yelped in alarm. You can't do that! Zin sighed. C3 has a mirror shard! The same type of shard I found? Sarala asked. Yes, he doesn't realize that it could be dangerous. C3, please open up, Ren said loudly, knocking on his door too.
Leave me alone. I will file a complaint with Mr. Saihan when he gets back, or with Mr. Jihan if your father gives you special treatment again.
C3's muffled voice growled through the door. That mirror shard is dangerous, though, Ren said. At least, I think it is. What are you doing with it?
I'm putting them together,
C3 said eagerly.
There's still some missing pieces, but it's a puzzle, isn't it? So I'll put the puzzle together. Make the mirror whole again.
Zin and Ren exchanged a glance, Zin's heart beating in his throat. He has more than one? Ren asked. Sounds like it, Zin muttered. Oh, just move, Sarala grunted, and she shoved the twins aside before they could shift aside themselves. In the next moment, Sarala lifted her leg and thrust her heel at the door. The door smashed inwards as the wood splintered and the hinges broke, falling to the ground with a loud thud. Sarala! Ren squeaked, covering her mouth with her hand. You're going to be in so much trouble. If these mirror shards are a threat. But Sarala couldn't finish her words. As the trio stumbled into C3's room, they were blinded by a bright light. Zin shielded his eyes with his hand, then squinted through his fingers to see what was happening. The shards sat on the ground, making up a cracked mirror almost the length of a door. C3 didn't just find a few shards, but most of them. There were only about 6 or 7 missing pieces, yet each mirror shard lit up, and the holes were concealed by the blinding white glow. The light swirled all around the 4 students, creating a whooshing wind as it got faster and faster. Then, quite suddenly, it stopped, and the room fell into darkness. Zin blinked several times, his eyes slow to adjust. It took him a moment to realize that there were transparent figures all around the room, which soon solidified. Zin and Ren exchanged another glance, Zin able to see his own petrified face reflected in Ren's glasses. Spirits!